our last panel of the day. We saved the affairs of the heart for the last one because you all are big, mushy mush pots who love love. And I can tell Cari agrees with me. So let's jump in. We've got Amanda Radley, Charlie Cochrane, Cari Hunter, Anna Larner, and Cathy Dunnell. And they are going to talk today about romance and love. And Cari can tell you about killing people in the midst of that.
In a romantic kind of way.
In a romantic way, yes. So I'm going to ask a really just random question to start with. What is it about romance that appeals to you? And what do you find is a turnoff? Amanda.
I knew it would be me. Well, interesting story. When I wrote my first novel, which was fan fiction to start with and got picked up by a publishing house, I think I'd been in the editing process for about a week when I realized I'd written a romance novel. I hadn't actually twigged on that fact at all. I just thought I'd written a story. And my publisher was saying, oh yeah, well, you know, when you put it in the romance category, and I was like, oh yeah, it's a romance. I hadn't actually realized. So I just write stories and they always seem to have romance in them. So I don't know. It must be subconscious. I must be subconsciously drawn to it. And I often write stories about two characters coming together, and they're obviously very, very opposites attract, and they eventually come together in a relationship. So I think just the fact that I write characters that are opposites, they're going to have to eventually opposites attract. Otherwise, it's going to be a very long, very boring book. So I think the romance just sort of has to happen just because of the sort of start of what I start with opposites attract.
Okay, and what's a turnoff in writing in romance novels, not like in real life, because you know.
Yeah, we're not
root beer, right?
Yeah, it's root beer. We've been there. We've I think for me, it's characters that I don't personally like or understand. If a character is extremely out there and not someone I can connect with, for me. Because a lot of my books are character based. I do understand a flawed character. I don't have a problem with people who aren't exactly like me. But if I really cannot understand why a character's doing something continuously, then I'll find that a turn off, and I won't be able to carry on with the book.
Okay, cool. That's a great answer. Cari, how about you?
I don't really write romances. I don't write romances at all. Let's call a spade. I did try with Breathe, and I still managed to kill a 14-year-old within the first couple of chapters, so that didn't work out. But then again, I do kind of write romances within the genre that I do write in. I write thriller, police procedural, mysteries mostly, and yet, it's finding a way to put character stuff in with the plot. I mean, nobody writes a pure mystery without having some kind of interest from a character point of view. So it always heartens me when I hear people, talk about the Dark Peak books, where they basically played the long game with the relationship in that. So the people who followed Meg and Sana through three books, got the romance that they wanted. It just took 3 books to unravel because it was the B plot, it was the C plot, it wasn't the A plot, where the crime necessarily in a crime novel is always the A plot. I think it took a few readers a while to get their heads around that, because there is this expectation, and this is coming to the turn off kind of part of the question. There is this expectation in lesbian fiction or women fiction for there to be a romantic plot, and it should be sort of like more of a focus than perhaps I would make it. And so there is that pressure, and I find that difficult sometimes to work around. But I've got to that point, I think, now where I will just write what I want to write. A new novel, Unbreakable, is absolutely not a romance, but that doesn't mean that there aren't rewarding characters in there and relationships in there. It's not a love story, but it's about love. So people who read that will, be able to unpick the character stuff within quite a dark and twisty film, hopefully.
Awesome. And what do you find a turn off?
The pressure, the expectations of being, of having to sort of like super glue a romance into a book that's not a romance.
Okay.
so that I find it difficult sometimes, but like I say, I've kind of managed to sit on those expectations a little bit. And I think that people who've been reading me for a while know that I can do the character stuff. It just not necessarily sort of like, the main bit of the book will be maybe a plot, a thriller, a mystery to unravel. But the characters are there, the relationships are there as well.
Cool. Anna, how about you?
Yeah, and I love romance that explores our love, lesbian love in the case of my stories, and to see it on the page, to see two women falling in love with each other, and building the chemistry and writing that chemistry. I know when I was little, finding books that we lesbian romance writers or LGBT writers write, how important it was to me. And that's one of the things that attracts me to reading it and writing the romance, is that exploration of what has been previously hidden and celebrating it, really. And I love the mechanics of it. I love the will they, won't they. I love the first look, the first shy kind of look away, and then the first touch. And I love all of that. And then bringing it together and bringing them together at the end for the reader as who've trusted me to do that. So those are things that appeal to me. The validation, if you like, is in that mix. Turn off in terms of where I've read a book and perhaps not really enjoyed it as much as I might be perhaps pacing, falling in love with the characters, which of course doesn't mean that they can't say I love you straight away. I remember in a panel last year we were talking about that, but it's got to match the journey that they're in. And if it comes a little bit too quickly, or even a little bit too late in the day, that can feel slightly off. I like a good story underneath the romance. We were talking about our panel today, weren't we, that the romance was important, but it allowed for other things within in terms of depth of plot. If it's a little thin again, sometimes they can lose me a little bit there. So I think that's it.
Nice, cool. And you're a big softie, aren't you? You're a romance softie.
Oh, I love, and I think I don't think it's superficial. I think it's such a blooming strong thing, and it keeps you. I don't know. Sometimes it's the only thing you have, and it's bonds people and makes them their best self, I think. So yeah, I am a proper, unashamedly, really.
Excellent. Charlie, how about you?
I think that the reason that I like romances and is the same reason that I like mysteries and crimes. There's that sense of completeness when you get to the end of the book, and almost a sense of a world made right. And I think that's why those two particular genres are incredibly popular with readers, because in the real world, there isn't always a happy ending. The villain isn't always caught and brought to justice. And I think that's really satisfying about romance books and mystery books, is that you get to the end of it and you go, oh, that's nice, isn't it? It's just it's complete. So I guess one of the turn-offs is books that do not bring that completion at the end, that you get to the end of it and you go, I'm going to throw this against the wall because it's just let me down in the last chapter for whatever reason. Yeah. The other real turn-off that I have and is soppy women, not soppy as in, liking love. The image, and it's probably one we've seen in a lot of films, isn't it? It's the woman in her slinky evening gown and the high heel shoes running away. She's always in those. I don't know why, it's the middle of the day. And she's running away from the villain, when if she'd had any sense, she'd have stayed in that cellar with a ruddy great club and whacked him. And it's just that sort of thing that really annoys me. It's that making women be soppy and stupid and take the wrong decisions just so that they can be rescued. So yeah, probably not.
In underwear, they're always running in their underwear too.
Their underwear, yes, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I do it every night. I'm out running down the street in my pants, but. Yeah.
Well, we read that in the newspaper, didn't we? The local news.
Yeah, absolutely. But now it's just so commonplace that nobody mentions it.
Yeah.
Cathy, how about you?
Yeah, I think the reason I like romance is it's a very universal experience, isn't it? Sort of falling in love. But I think, as Anna has said, there's been a kind of paucity of stories out there about women falling in love with each other. And so it's always really exciting when you finally get to read those kind of stories that you kind of missed out on when you were growing up. And yeah, I just really I like all the angst about it. I like all the sort of things that people have to go through in order to be together. I particularly like reading queer historical fiction, and I think that always gives a kind of different perspective about challenges that people would have faced living in very different times and circumstances. So I always find that really interesting. I think the turn off for me is just when it's never really believable about why two people are in love with each other. I think one example I can always think of is Sebastian Faulk's Birdsong, where he's got the two main characters and they're just suddenly he just says, oh, and then they're in love, and you're like, but why? Like, they've barely spoken to each other. Like, why are they suddenly in love? And it was just so infuriating that I just couldn't enjoy any other part of that novel. So I think, yeah, that's the biggest turn off for me. It's just not being clear why these two people are in love. Yeah,
I totally agree with that. We watched a movie recently and they were in love, and I thought, I don't even like her, let alone love her. I mean, throw her in the river. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so this question kind of came out of the panel just before this, but I think it was an interesting one. And because you're all old hands now at publishing, well, kind of, Cathy. I mean, you're going to get there. And also, just to the people watching, there's a Q&A section. Please throw your questions for the authors into the Q&A, and I will ask them. So find out what their favorite color is, or food, or, what they named their second pet, whatever. So the question before this is, what do you wish you'd known before you were published? And I think, there's plenty of things that we'd all change or do differently, but what do you wish you'd known before you published your first book? Amanda, your first book was quite a while ago now, I think. So yeah. What do you wish you'd known?
Well, this is kind of timely because my first book was Flight SQA 016. I would have firstly chosen to not call it that. But it's out of contract with the original publisher, and now it's going to be published by Bold Strokes next month. So sort of my first book is also my 23rd. So having to go through it again has really highlighted how much I've changed. And I changed a lot when I submitted that. Well, I didn't submit it when I was first picked up by a publisher to actually it becoming a novel. And I think for me, I would have wanted a lot more understanding of the mechanics of writing, the editorial side of things, understanding POV and show don't tell and things like that, which would have made writing from the beginning a lot easier going into that first novel if I'd understood all of that, rather than writing it from a fan fiction point of view where you can do what you like and there are no rules, and suddenly entering a world where there are lots of rules, and they are rules for reasons. I think first of all, I was very much like, oh, I don't need to do that. I can be quirky. And then you realize the background behind the rules and think, oh, yeah, I can't be quirky. I do need to follow these. So for me, it would have been an understanding of the mechanics of novel writing and why that is so important. If I'd gone into the book with that, I would have been able to make the whole story a lot stronger earlier, rather than all the work I had to put in.
Great. That's a great answer. Point of view is so important.
And mystifying when you're fan fiction.
yeah. Charlie, how about you?
I think the thing I wish I'd known was that actually writing the book was the easy bit, because it's the whole, and clearly there's the bit about, and you need to have the next one in line, but that was all right. It was just the whole social media, self-promotion, which I really, I'm British, I don't like doing it. And just the whole mechanics around how you actually go around getting this book in front of people. So I think if there are any aspiring authors listening in on the session, yes, it's really important to write the best possible book that you can, but just be prepared that unless you are one of a very small group of people, you will have to do, no matter how much your publisher supports you, and Bold Strokes are very good at that, you will still have to do a lot of work for yourself and learn that part of your trade. alongside learning all the things like edits and coping with that. So yeah.
And in this world of kind of social media, that's even more so, I think, than it's ever been before, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And learning as well that you know, how to go about it, what to say, what not to say. And I do see a lot of, you know, newish authors rubbing people up the wrong way. I mean, the classic thing is you get a Facebook request from somebody to friend them and you go, well, look, they're another author. So you do that. And the next thing is a message saying, will you buy my book? You feel like saying, you're now on my list of people whose books I'll never buy. But, you know, somebody is obviously giving people some really poor advice, which is sad, you know. But, you know, you have to learn somewhere.
Yeah, thank you. Cathy, I asked you this on the last panel, but you've had all of 10 minutes to think about it. So any other thoughts on that?
No, I think I'm still, quite, obviously like a debutante, is that the word? So my, it's not going to be published until November. So probably if you ask me, in a year's time, I'll have a whole host of things I wish I'd known. I think at this stage, I wish I'd just known about, streamlining my story, and then I wouldn't have had to cut so much out of it in the beginning. So I think that's probably like my main takeaway that I've had so far. Cool,
perfect, thank you. Anna, how about you?
Yes, I mean, everything everybody said, I think would it's always wiser in hindsight. Certainly structure of writing, lesbian romance, but it's one of those things, sometimes the thing you wish you'd known, I also wish I'm glad I didn't know it, because there's a certain that I wouldn't want to have been intimidated. So it's a funny one, isn't it, really? So definitely for me, craft, I think, as Amanda was saying, because it's made it a little bit more efficient in how you write. But I'm pleased I didn't know that of the unspoken kind of rules and things too much, or that the pressures or responsibilities. I understand them now, and I think I would have been intimidated, I think, if I had known too much.
Yeah, excellent. And Cari?
I think maybe just a bit of reassurance that it'd actually turn out all right. Everything, just that somebody would buy a book set in English, set in a little, village in England when you're writing with an American publisher, and that they wouldn't touch it or change it or mess around with the language, and that actually you become known for, or that you would become known for that kind of thing, and that it would be okay to write like that, and to continue to sort of write in the vein that I wanted to write. I've always had the confidence to do it, to be fair, but I think if I'd have known in advance, it would have just chilled me out a little bit more. To be fair, I was surprised that Bold Strokes even picked up Snowbound for all of those reasons. And I was told at the first Bold Strokes Nottingham thing, I was told by an author that they basically just trash it. In the editing process, it would become an American book, and I was crapping myself basically, because I thought that was what they would do, that they would Americanize everything, and they didn't. I mean, they left it as it was. They actually had the balls to publish it as it was, and they've continued to support everything that I've written. So if I'd have known that, and I would probably have been happier before I got my edits. I mean, all the technical stuff was, I was doing all the same mistakes that everybody makes with their first book. But we were able to, sort that out, and I've continued to learn, and now I'm getting manuscripts back with no notes files, which is brilliant. So
that's amazing.
But just say, it'll turn out okay, and people will be your best friends over it. I've got so many good readers and mates through this. It's just been great.
Awesome. Right. So we've got lots of writing type questions, but I want to kind of go with the heart and talk about that a little bit. When it comes to romance, what is the most difficult thing you find about creating the romance and the conflict within the romance? Because I know I get really tired of people talking to each other, right? And just yeah. So what for you is the difficult part of building the actual romance? Charlie, let's start with you this time.
I think something I think Cathy mentioned earlier is that believability. If your characters are having a conversation, it has to be a conversation. And I write gay romance, so I'm I've got lots of gay friends, and I've always read men's literature. So, you know, getting into the head of men is a challenge, but actually it's much more of a challenge. It's just that believability thing. You know, your reader has to be able to read it and say, this is two real people doing what real people do, rather than sometimes you find in books you watch on television, you think nobody ever had this conversation ever outside of a page. And I think it's just assuring yourself, and it's all sorts of things. It's the pace, it's whatever, and sometimes you try and, you know, it's when you go back through your work, and I'm a great believer in reading it aloud and making sure that it works, particularly in dialogue, because you read it and you go, it's just no, and you start again. So just making sure that everything that happens is authentic.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, absolutely true. Anna, what do you think?
I think it's trying to make sure the conflict comes almost organically. So it's not something put onto them too much, that it's perhaps in their own nature. So it fits them, and that it's not perhaps too extreme, where somebody's in a conflict with themselves makes them an unlikable character. So it's handling it sensitively for the reader to read that particular struggle. And then if it's an external conflict, again, the believability embedded in a strong story, in a strong narrative. So I think keeping your conflict in proportion, and the more that it comes, the conflict can't be tagged on at the end. I remember Ruth Meadows was saying that it should be built, and then the conflict, you know, is almost like an explosion from what was already there. So it's building it in, isn't it? And keeping it proportionate.
Cool, excellent. Amanda?
I agree with Charlie and Anna. It's about the authenticity of the realism of the characters and the authenticity of any conflict. I think for me the most difficult thing is that a romance, in its, if you do follow a structure, and there is a certain structure that does need to be followed, is two people gradually coming together, a conflict, either internal or external, pulling them apart, and then them overcoming that conflict and coming back together again. And if you're following a plan like that, it can become contrived or unbelievable very, very quickly. So I think the most difficult thing for me is to ensure that I'm following a path, but without it seeming like I'm following a path. And I think a lot of people are expecting there to be an argument or something that's going to pull them apart. And I'm very pragmatic and practical. And if it's anything that can be resolved by someone just having a conversation, that frustrates me, because it's just like, oh, if you just spoke. And we've all watched those TV programs, those movies, and think, God, if these people just had one phone call, this whole film would be 10 minutes long. So just having that authenticity and ensuring that everything's balanced, even though people are flawed. You can't have too much flaw in your conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, my headpiece is just gone. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. Cari, how about you?
I kind of get a bit of a get out of jail free card with the whole romantic arc and plot kind of rules and regulations, because I write thrillers with relationships kind of tagged in there, so I don't feel obliged to have a conflict at 80% or whatever the recommendation is these days. It was quite funny when I was writing the Dark Pete series, because my editor had a conniption fit at the end of no good reason, because I hadn't made Meg and Santa a couple. She's like, well, we need to give them a hint at least that they're together. So I ended up chopping out some reference to them both going to Greece to chase Greek lesbians around. And that was a kind of compromise, that there was a hint that they would get together. And then in the second book, I'd broken them up completely, which was probably another conniption fit. But yeah, like I say, that was a romance over 3 books. So there was no 80% kind of breakup with that. And yeah, with writing thrillers, you kind of govern by the thriller aspect of it. So my characters don't tend to even get together till the very end of the book. You know, if they have sex, it probably happens in an epilogue, or it happens in the throes of some kind of terrible trauma that they're experiencing in a cave or whatever. yeah, it doesn't follow the pattern of a traditional romance. So the conflict comes mainly from outside sources. You know, a bad guy will be dating them, or they're trying to find a bad guy. It's rarely within the actual relationship itself. They're actually probably mainly a couple for the entire book, or together as a kind of friendship that then develops, which is nice because who likes rules, right?
I'm an editor. I like rules a lot.
Can I nip in and add a rider to Cari talking about her romance over 3 books? Because one of the great romances in British mystery fiction is Peter Wimsey and Harriet Vane, and that takes place over 3 books. So you were obviously on a winner there, Cari. So it's a classic thing. Yeah.
Unless you're like not writing threesome.
Okay, I'm going to ask some of our questions over here. Why did you choose Bold Strokes? That's a nice, straightforward one. So, Cathy, why'd you choose Bold Strokes?
Was I'd read quite a few novels that were already published in Bold Strokes, and I knew that they were sort of the market leader for the kind of stuff that I wanted to write. And so, yeah, that was, I thought I'd give my novel a first go at trying to be published by Bold Strokes.
Cool. Excellent. Amanda? Because you've had a different path, so.
Yeah, well, I've been with another publisher and then I've been self-published, and I was considering going back with a publisher. It was a whim, actually, that I emailed BSB. It was a pandemic. I did lots of crazy things, and one of them was to email and to sort of have a conversation. For me, again, like Cathy says, they're market leaders, and having been successfully self-published, I won a Lambda self-published. I know how to publish a book. So I wanted a publishing house that could help me reach goals and next steps that I wouldn't be able to reach on my own. I know how to publish a book. I know how to edit a book. I have a team of people behind me doing that. So for me, it was the fact that BSB could do all the things that I'd done myself and a little bit extra. So that was sort of, it was BSB or nothing. I wasn't looking for a publishing house specifically. It was just BSB would be the only publishing house for me that would be able to help me reach my goals.
Cool. Excellent. So you went into it with a very clear kind of almost business mind. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I'm primarily a business person. I've always looked at the sort of numbers and the stats of things, and I'm not a creative. That's my wife, as you know, Vic. She's the sort of head in the clouds creative person. I'm the what are the facts and figures and numbers here. So for me, it was a business decision, but with a dose of sort of creativity, because I know that the editing staff like yourself at BSB know what they're talking about and can help me in the areas where I'm weaker. So for me, it was obvious choice.
Cool. Awesome. Cari?
I'm going way back to YLAF, which was when I first heard about Bold Strokes. So the York Lesbian Arts Festival, which was, oh God, I went to it with my wife when we were first together. So maybe 20 odd years ago. I don't know. And that was where I first saw Rad, who was representing Bold Strokes then. And she was a very impactful kind of figure. She spoke with a lot of passion, and she was obviously very proud and involved in what she did. So when I wrote Snowbound and I finished that, I mean, I didn't know whether it ticked the right boxes or not, but I knew that Bold Strokes were the publisher that I was going to choose to send it to. I mean, I looked at others. There were others at the time. There was quite a few, but it was Bold Strokes that had caught my attention mainly because of Rad. And that's why I submitted to them. I have no regrets. I wouldn't have gone any other route. I'm really proud to still be with Bold Strokes now, and what, nine novels in now. So yeah. Maybe 10 years with you guys.
Awesome. Charlie, because you, like Amanda, you've had a different path as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a great believer in you don't have all your eggs in one basket. I mean, and that's me being completely honest and completely. So I'm with various publishers. Also have some self-published books, but also, like Amanda, was just really impressed with the quality of product from Bold Strokes. So at the time that I was looking around to diversify, because I mean I've been published since 2008, and I've seen plenty of publishers come and go, and an awful lot go, not just within our genre, but you know, that on the wider scene. So I always felt I need to spread it about a bit, you know, for my own sanity, because having seen authors get into sort of terrible situations with sorry, sorry, just let me get rid of the message on screen. I can see you all again now. So I think it was that, but I wouldn't have gone with Bold Strokes if I hadn't been impressed with just the quality of product and the professional side of things. I think Jerry Wheeler might have been my editor for the books, and he's just really good. So I think it was a people thing as well, because I think I knew Victoria through UK Meet, and Cari, I may have known you through fan fiction before any of this. So again, it's knowing, well, if these people trust the publisher, then they've got to be good eggs. And I think you get a lot of that in writing as well. It's knowing somebody who knows and can say, yeah, they're all right, or conversely, don't touch them with a barge pole.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a wonderful community, isn't it? You really do make these connections kind of all over the place and end up with lifelong friends. Anna, how about you?
Well, it was with yourself, Vic, really, in States of Independence. And
yeah.
I was so impressed. It must have been in 2012 or something like that. And I was so impressed, and my mind was completely blown by it, actually. And I chanced upon you in many ways. And I whether you kind of, as you say, a bond was made for me. Seeing you guys, seeing the authors, how excited and proud, and it was, you know, it did radiate to the audience. And I didn't really look back. And I also I kept quite focused on bullshit books. So there's obviously something that had really reached out and made a connection for me. But like everybody else, it makes me enormously proud, and to be with bullshit books and yeah, definitely. I think it's been, you know, brilliant all the way through each process, and I've learned such a lot and continue to learn such a lot, which is important, isn't it? Developing
absolutely.
Career.
Yeah, absolutely. Until, of course, you get to the point where you're like Cari and you don't even get editor's notes anymore. We have an actual romance question in the box, which is good. How do you make sure that the romance doesn't follow kind of a boring formula? How do you keep your romance fresh? So let's start, Anna, let's start with you on that one.
I think, right, and it's a well said thing, but right from your heart, write your story, because the freshness will come from your idea, you know, your passion for those characters, your take on their romance and the setting that you want to bring. So obviously, we as you say, we've spoken about rules and things, but the freshness will come from you being you and your individuality, and that's something I hold on to. So even though I know the rules and I would always now try to work efficiently, I can only write the book in my heart, and I think that will bring its own freshness,
Nice.
in my opinion.
What a lovely answer. Fantastic. Amanda?
That was
Especially
a lovely
with so
answer,
many. How do you?
Yeah, I think for me, to make sure it's tropes, for example, tropes work because people like familiarity, and that's why the romance, you know, storyline works. People like the familiarity of it, even with mysteries and thrillers and anything. There's a certain thing that people expect to happen. So it's difficult to branch away from that enough to be unique, but to stay on that path enough to be what somebody expects. Even if somebody is, if it's a murder mystery, someone is expecting a surprise of who the murderer was. Even if the expectation is a surprise, there's still that balance between what people's expectations are and sort of subverting the trope in some way. I think the way I try to do it, and I hope I manage to, I try to never write one too formulaic, is to bake in the conflict at the start. And that's to generally look at characters, again, with opposites attract. I've already given myself a huge lead in the race by already getting two people who are not necessarily going to work together, or their jobs are going to instantly bring them together, but also bring the conflict at a later date. So I cheat in many ways by putting them in a situation that I know is going to have conflict at a later date. And again, it's the familiarity of that people kind of know these people are perfect for one another and they will help one another, but one of them has to give, or they both have to give along the route. And that hopefully gives a little bit of difference to sort of the formula.
Nice. Great answer. Charlie?
I think there's two parts to this answer, one of which is going to make me sound even nuttier than I probably am. I think if you're true to your characters, if you create real people, then it won't be cliched, even if they are in that, if you like, slightly cliched situation of they fall in love and then there's conflict and you know, and that has to be resolved. If they're real, if they sound like real people, then it doesn't matter. That avoids cliche in itself. I think the other thing is, and it'd be interesting to see what the other authors think of this. For my best stories, I've always felt like I'm telling a story that is being told to me by my characters, and they're saying to me, and this is what happened next. I just recently read a book about Tolkien and how he wrote Lord of the Rings. It was not planned. This is amazing. You know, he just sat down and he wrote, and I thought that's great because that's what I do. And his thing was he was trying to find out what really happened. And when he went back and rewrote sections, it was because he had realized that what he'd written in the first place wasn't the real events. And to me, that's how it feels when I'm writing. It's like I have these two characters and they're telling me what happened next in their life story rather than me imposing on them, and this is what I want you to do. That may sound completely insane, but I'm really interested in when any of you lot have a similar feeling as you write, that actually you're...
That's a great question, Charlie. Cari, you want to go?
Yeah, I'm kind of boring and they don't... I hear writers say this and I think I'm missing out, but with me, it's me. I'm the writer. I'm writing them. They don't really sort of like take on a brain and a life of their own where they're writing their own story. I think there's a control thing in terms of, you know, how you're writing. And if I'm writing a thriller, then I've usually got everything plotted out and the characters are going along with it. I don't get a voice in my head saying, yeah, but I wouldn't do that. I'd do this. It's me saying that. And I think sometimes, like I say, I envy the writers who do have that connection with their characters. And I'm not saying I don't have a connection with my characters. I love all my characters. Some of them I can't let go, so I throw into, you know, a couple of books. But it's always me, sort of like, it's always me in control. And it's always me that's putting the voices into their heads. They're not doing it themselves. But my wife writes differently. She would sort of like say, yeah, well, they're doing their own thing at the moment. They're just going their own way. So I know that sort of like process does exist, but it's just not my process. And I don't know why. Like I say, I don't know whether I'm missing out or whether it just works different. Different strokes for different folks.
We're all just different, aren't we? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
just different. Cathy, how about you? I don't even know what the question is anymore. Just say what you want.
Yeah, I think picking up on what I think both Anna and Charlie were saying is about characters. I think if you speak to people in real life and ask about their you know, the great love of their life, you'll never hear the exact same story twice. You know, there'll always be something different because it's two different people each time. So I think as long as if you've got fresh characters and you're not just creating, you know, sort of cardboard cutout people, but real people, then the romance, I think, will always be fresh. And I think in answer to kind of like what Charlie was saying, I think from writing my novel, I definitely found that my characters were sort of alive and kind of dictating a little bit about the way the story would go. And I often did that thing where I found I wrote a line of dialogue for them and then was immediately like, no, that's completely wrong. They'd never say that. And it just seemed really obvious and jarring. And so I had to rewrite it more as they would actually have said it. So I think the sort of the characters are really the key to kind of keeping the story fresh. That's
great answers. And as an editor, it makes me happy to hear you're creating these like human beings. Quick fire. If you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be? Amanda.
Pine tree.
Pine. Charlie.
Hawthorn.
Hawthorne.
Hawthorne.
I wouldn't have even thought of Hawthorne. Cathy.
Smell fragrant, but really spiky.
Cathy.
Copper Beech.
Copper Beech. Nice. Anna?
I'm torn between an oak and perhaps an apple blossom.
Oh, I can see apple blossom for sure. Cari?
Rowan.
Nice. Magical. All right. I've answered that one. Okay. Characters or plot first? Cari?
Both together, I think. Usually the characters a little bit before the plot,
Okay.
but pretty much in tandem with each other.
Okay. Anna?
I think character first, but like Harry, then I think the plot is up there with it, but characters first.
Okay. Cathy?
Yeah, characters first and they drive the plot.
Excellent. Charlie?
Oh, characters. Even when I'm writing a murder mystery, and I've got a terrible confession to make. Sometimes I'm 2/3 of the way through it and I don't know who did it. And I have to give it to my daughter to read and she tells me and it's lovely.
Excellent. Amanda?
Characters. Unless I'm writing mystery, in which case I do have to go with plot because I don't have a daughter to help me find out who the murderer is.
She's available, very cheap rates.
Absolutely. Fine. Next time I write one, I'll be in touch.
Excellent. So I'm pretty much the only plot first person. Let's see. Is there a genre you haven't written that you'd like to try? Let's see. Cathy, do you think there's a genre out there you want to play with?
Yeah, I have an ambition to write some sort of sprawling space opera. That's the kind of genre I'd really like to go for.
Nice. I like a sprawling space opera. See, that's goals, man. That's like
yeah,
excellent. Anna, how about you?
Yeah, I would like to write something that kind of is clever and bends somebody's mind a bit. So not frightens them or not sort of like a sort of disturbing bending of the mind, but something that's clever. You think of, I think the film Sixth Sense, it's a clever premise, isn't it? Fight Club. It's those sort of a kind of an intelligent way of looking at something, and so that kind of book, I don't know what genre that would fit into, but that intrigues me. The craft behind it as much as the genre. But as we spoke about in the previous panel, I'm probably quite ready to write some romantic stuff. But certainly, yeah, that kind of thing.
But at some point, we're going to see some kind of Sixth Sense Fight Club lesbian from you.
Maybe, I don't know, but I love that kind of cleverness. So the author has you throughout the story, but as a reader, you really want to go a journey with them, and yeah, so that you don't know what you've begun, and obviously as the writer, I know what you've begun, and it's clever from the get go. I guess that I don't know, speculative fiction maybe, but maybe have to see. I like the idea of a beginning and which is really highly intriguing. I had in mind a long time ago of a church and someone kneeling on the aisle, on the altar, very distressed, and that's where the story would begin. It's that kind of what has happened, and that kind of clever kind of telling of the story, and the revealing of what's gone on. That sort of thing.
Awesome. I like it. Cari?
I'm just giggling at my wife in the background. So I just said, "What can I write?" And we both come to the conclusion that I would love to write a fluffy romance, and have absolutely no kind of skill in doing that at all. So no, that's absolute bollocks. I wouldn't write a fluffy romance. I'm kind of happy doing what I'm doing, to be fair. Mucking around with some genres in the thriller and mystery. I mean, I like reading fantasy and not space opera, but sort of like sprawling epics. But I don't think I could ever write one. All those characters.
So you wouldn't go for a Jacqueline Carey, Kushil's Dark?
No, but God love her for doing such a brilliant job with the Kushil's Dark, and my hat's off to people who can do that. But I just
awesome. And Amanda?
Yeah, it sounds exhausting. I will stick to what I'm writing. I think hats off to anyone who can write, even fantasy. My wife writes fantasy and she's like, this is the world they're in and this is how electricity works. I'm like, you've got to figure out how electricity works. That just sounds exhausting. Can't you just, modern day, everything's fine. So no, I don't have the patience for it.
Excellent. Charlie, did I ask you? Sorry.
Yeah, I was trying to think of a clever answer. I mean, the only thing I felt inclined to write and haven't because I'm just too lazy is faction, if you like. I'd love to write about Wilfred Owen and a story about him or about Alan Turing, but I would feel such a weight of responsibility for getting them absolutely right on the page that I think it's too much responsibility.
Bit too daunting, that. Yeah.
That I would let them down if you like.
Yeah, know what you mean. Somebody's asked a question, and I'm not completely sure what they mean, but it says, how do you develop the romantic chemistry between your lovers? Have you ever had to adjust how that impacts the reader? So I'm not really sure what you mean by how it impacts the reader. It says based on how it comes off the page. I don't know. Have you ever had a chemistry that you thought might not make it to a reader the right way? Does anybody want to take that one?
I've had to sort of make changes to my romance. I'm very good at, although I'm character first, I'm not necessarily romance first. So I will go character first, then I'll put a plot in, and then I'll be so excited about the plot, I'll forget about the romance bit. So quite often my editor will come back and go, there's no romance arc, or there kind of is, but I haven't really spelt it out. So sometimes I have to, because I know the characters and I write very lightly. I don't put a huge amount of detail in. I try to write in a sort of pace that would make a reader read quite quickly. So I don't spell everything out. And sometimes I think I'm too much in my own head. And we're like, oh, come on, you know that means that, but people don't. So I have to go back sometimes and add more. So I suppose, yeah, in that sense, I do have to go back and kind of, really make it obvious these people are falling in love. Just to sort of like really spell it out, just to make sure.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. Right. We are coming to the end of our whole BSB UK day. So what I'd like you to tell us is what's your current book, what's your forthcoming book, and when does that come out? So, Cathy.
So my first novel is called Beulah Lodge and is coming out on the 1st of November.
Excellent. And Anna?
My latest, if you like, was, although back in April 2019, was Love's Portrait. My coming out in December is Highland Whirl, which is a sequel to Highland Flame.
Fantastic. Cari?
I've got Unbreakable coming out in October.
Excellent. And what was your most recent one?
Oh, Breathe. The one with the paramedic and lots of flooding, where I flooded Manchester, basically, accidentally.
Excellent. Amanda?
Under Her Influence, which was out, 5 days ago. So that's my most recent one. And Flight will be coming out, reprint of that will be coming out next month in July.
Awesome. And Charlie?
My last one with BSB was Don't Kiss the Vicar. And just done a first draft for a follow-up to that. So that's the next thing that's in my writing queue, which is to lick that into some acceptable shape.
Fantastic. Excellent. Thank you all for doing this and for, sticking with us throughout the day. Thank you to everybody who came and hung out with us today and watched all the panels. They will all go onto the Facebook, YouTube. It'll go onto a social media page of some kind that has videos. I believe we have a Bold Strokes YouTube page. And you can obviously have been watching them on Facebook today. Please go over to boldstrokesbooks.com, check out our authors, check out the pre-orders that are available. There's so much good stuff on there. And thank you for everything and for being with us. This is our 12th year that we've done the UK event, which is pretty spectacular. And to be able to keep you guys coming around and the authors coming around and have new authors coming around is really, really special. Be sure to keep checking out the Bold Strokes page as well. The bookathons happen all the time. The BSB previews for books like Amanda's has just come out, and for the BIPOC anthology, which has just come out as well, that just happened recently. So check out the preview days. And we've got PubFest coming up as well at the end of the month, where you get to ask all your super publishing questions and get a view from behind the curtain. So with that, I will say thank you to all our panelists who have been with us today, to Sandy, who has been with us at God stupid o'clock this morning and all day long. And we'll see you soon. Thanks, everybody.